You will be shocked to hear what happened to my wife after our divorce. Her parents were angry with me, but I knew my truth, and I was right. What happened exactly? Let me tell you. Lauren and I had been together for 7 years, with 2 of those spent as husband and wife. We held off on having kids at first, wanting to make sure we were financially secure before taking that step, just trying to be smart about it. For a while, everything seemed to be going well, or at least, that's what I believed. Once we hit our 2-year anniversary, we figured it was finally time to start trying for a baby. It felt like the natural next step. Looking back now, I don't know how I didn't see it. The warning signs were there, small things that should have stood out. But when you're living in the moment, you don't always notice them. I chalked it up to the normal ups and downs every couple faces, nothing alarming. I loved Lauren. I truly thought we were solid, that we'd go the distance. But man, I couldn't have been more wrong. A few months passed as we tried for a baby, and I felt good about where we were. My mind was filled with thoughts of the future, imagining what life would be like as a dad. I had no clue that everything was about to blow up in my face. One night, I was just relaxing at home when I noticed Lauren acting a little off. She was glued to her phone way more than usual, but at first, I didn't think much of it. "Who you talking to?" I asked casually from the couch, not even looking away from the TV. "Just Lisa," she answered quickly, locking her screen like it was second nature. "She's going through some stuff." I nodded, not dwelling on it. Lisa had always been kind of a mess, so it wasn't weird for Lauren to be there for her. But then, Lauren started staying out late more often, saying she had work obligations or that she was meeting up with friends. One evening, as she was heading out, I leaned against the doorway, keeping my tone light. "You've been out a lot lately." She sighed, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Yeah, work's been crazy. And Lisa, well, you know how she is. She needs someone to talk to. Every other night?" I joked, raising an eyebrow, but something in her expression made my stomach tighten. Her tone sharpened as she turned back to me. "You don't trust me?" That threw me. "What?" "Of course, I do," I said, caught completely off guard. "I don't need you questioning my every move, Jason," she snapped, shaking her head as she stepped out the door. "I'll see you later." At that moment, a part of me felt like something was off, but another part didn't want to go there. I trusted her. I mean, that's what marriage is, right? You don't marry someone unless you trust them. So, I let it go. But things didn't get better. If anything, they got worse. Lauren grew distant. Our conversations became stiff, like we were just checking off boxes instead of actually connecting. The air between us felt heavy, like even when we were in the same room, we were miles apart. One night, she came home way later than usual. I had already gone to bed, but the sound of the front door creaking open woke me. She was moving carefully, slipping off her shoes like she was trying not to make a sound. Before I even laid eyes on her, I felt it. Something was wrong. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and sat up as she stepped into the bedroom. "Where were you?" My voice was thick with grogginess, but there was an edge to it. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. So fast that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it. "Work drinks ran late," she said, setting her bag down without even glancing my way. Something twisted in my gut. "You could have at least texted," I said, keeping my voice even. She let out a sigh, already turning away, pulling off her earrings like the conversation was over. I didn't think I needed to check in every second of the day. That was the first real red flag. The way she said it, casual, dismissive, like I was being unreasonable for even bringing it up. But she still wouldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to press her, to call her out right then and there. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face what I was starting to suspect. So I let it slide. After that, things only spiraled further. Lauren was out more and more, and any time I brought it up, she'd either brush me off or get defensive. "Lauren, you've been going out a lot lately," I said one evening as she reached for her coat. She barely paused. "Yeah, work's been crazy." "It was always work. Always with work," I muttered under my breath. She turned back sharply, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I hesitated. "I don't know. It just feels like you never have time for me anymore." She rolled her eyes. "Jason, I don't need this right now." And just like that, she was gone again. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband jumping to conclusions. I told myself I was overthinking, just being insecure. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. I couldn't bring myself to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I was building a life with, could do something like that to me. Then one night, everything unraveled. Lauren had told me she'd be working late again, so I was home alone, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not really watching. Something felt off. You ever get that deep in your gut feeling, like you just know something bad is about to happen? That was me, sitting there in the dim glow of the screen, my mind racing. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't push it down anymore. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. I knew it was wrong. I hated myself for it, even as I was doing it. But I was desperate. I needed answers. I needed the truth. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the screen, my heart hammering so hard I swear I could hear it in the quiet room. I scrolled through her messages. And there it was. Everything I needed to know. She had been texting some guy, Derek, or something like that. The messages went back for weeks. And they weren't just friendly. Not even close. They talked about meeting up. About their nights together. About me. About how she had to be careful. About how she didn't want me to find out. I felt sick. My stomach twisted into knots. My hands went numb. But I kept reading, over and over, like if I stared at the words long enough, maybe they'd stop being real. Maybe I'd wake up and this would all just be a bad dream. But it wasn't. Lauren had been cheating on me. I sat there for hours, phone in hand, staring into nothing. My mind kept flashing back to every single moment I had ignored my instincts. Every time I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I felt like a fool. The biggest idiot in the world. I didn't even know what I was going to say when she got home. I just sat there, waiting, stewing in my own thoughts, my anger simmering beneath the surface. When she finally walked through the door, I didn't hesitate. I held up the phone, my voice cold and steady. What the hell is this, Lauren? She stopped dead in her tracks. Her face paled. For a split second, I thought she might try to lie her way out of it. But she didn't. Instead, her eyes filled with tears, and before I could even get another word out, she started crying. I'm sorry, she choked out, her voice breaking. Jason, I'm so sorry. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for an explanation, for something, anything, that would make this make sense. But all she kept saying was the same thing, over and over. I didn't mean for it to happen. That was the part that really got me. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. You didn't mean for it to happen? My voice came out sharp, laced with something between disbelief and fury. Lauren, how the hell do you accidentally cheat on your husband? Explain that to me. She just shook her head, her sobs growing heavier. I don't know. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. A mistake. I scoffed. Lauren, forgetting to pick up milk at the store is a mistake. What you did? That was a choice. She stood there, trembling, her hands shaking at her sides, tears spilling down her face. But I wasn't about to let her tears change anything. Right then and there, I told her I wanted a divorce. Lauren's face crumpled, her breath hitching like I had just knocked the wind out of her. Jason, no. Please, she begged, stepping toward me. I took a step back. We can fix this, she pleaded, desperation in her voice. We can go to therapy, talk to someone, anything. I shook my head, cutting her off. There's nothing to fix, Lauren. You made your choice. I exhaled sharply, my voice cold and firm. Now I'm making mine. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my arm, her grip tight, desperate. Please, baby. Everyone makes mistakes. You don't just throw away a marriage over one mistake. I let out another laugh, but there was no amusement in it. One mistake. I repeated, shaking my head. This wasn't a mistake, Lauren. It was a months-long affair. You lied to my face, snuck around behind my back, and now you expect me to just, what? Pretend it never happened? Go to therapy so I can sit across from some stranger while you cry about how sorry you are. I scoffed. No, I'm not that guy. I don't forgive cheating. Ever. She sobbed harder, her hands tangling in her hair, like she was unraveling right in front of me. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered again, her voice barely holding together. I clenched my jaw. You keep saying that like it means something, I muttered, rubbing a hand down my face. Like you just tripped and fell into bed with him. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head as reality settled over me like a crushing weight. I'm done, Lauren. We're done. The next few days were a blur. I wasted no time filing for divorce. Thanks to our prenup, the whole process was quick, clean, efficient, exactly how I wanted it. But Lauren? She didn't make it easy. She kept calling me at all hours, leaving voicemails, texting nonstop. She showed up at the house unannounced. Hell, she even reached out to my friends, trying to get them to convince me to talk to her. It was pathetic, honestly, like she thought if she just cried enough, I'd forget everything she did. But I wasn't about to let her worm her way back into my life. Not after this. At least I had the prenup. That alone saved me from the financial disaster most divorces turn into. I got to keep everything, my house, my savings, because she was the one who screwed up. It didn't make the betrayal any less painful, but at least I didn't lose everything on top of it. And that was it, the end of my marriage. The beginning of the mess that followed. At the time, I didn't realize just how much damage it would do to me emotionally. But trust me, that part was coming. 3 years later, and I was still dealing with the fallout. But we'll get to that. After the divorce, I did what I had to do. I cut off all contact with Lauren. I didn't want some closure conversation, no drawn-out apologies or half-baked excuses. I just wanted to move on. So I changed my number, moved to a new place, and basically went full ghost mode. If I could have erased her from my memory completely, I would have. It wasn't even about hating her. I was just done. I wanted her out of my life, out of my head. The first few months were rough. Not in the crying myself to sleep way. More like this strange, empty feeling I couldn't quite shake. It's hard to explain. When you're with someone for that long, they become part of your routine, part of your daily life. And then suddenly, they're just gone. It wasn't Lauren herself that I missed. It was the idea of what I thought we had. That was the hardest part, letting go of the future I thought we were building together. I remember one night, sitting at home with a soda in my hand, staring off into space, just thinking about how fast everything had gone to hell. One minute we were planning for kids. The next, I was signing divorce papers. It's crazy how fast life can flip upside down. But I guess that's life for you, huh? Around that time, I decided to try therapy. I wasn't exactly thrilled about it. Never saw myself as the kind of guy who needed a therapist. But after everything that happened, I figured I could use some help untangling the mess in my head. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Therapy helped me realize that what I was feeling wasn't just about Lauren cheating. It ran deeper than that. I don't get it, I admitted to my therapist one session, rubbing a hand over my face. I should be fine by now. It's been months. I don't even want her back, but I still feel. I don't know. Messed up. She nodded, tapping her pen against her notepad. Because it wasn't just about Lauren. This situation triggered things you probably haven't dealt with before. Things that go back further than your marriage. I frowned. Like what? She leaned forward slightly. Well, how did your family handle emotions when you were growing up? That one stopped me in my tracks. Because the truth? They didn't. In my house, you didn't talk about feelings. You sucked it up and dealt with it. Simple as that. So when Lauren cheated on me, I had no idea how to handle the betrayal. It was like every emotion I had bottled up for years exploded at once, and I had no clue what to do with it. Therapy helped me unpack all of that. Anyway, enough about that. Here's where things start to get interesting. 3 years passed. I was doing better. Not completely over it, but better. I focused on work, went out with friends more, even started dating again. Nothing too serious, but it felt good to put myself out there again. Occasionally, Lauren crossed my mind, not in an I miss her way, more like an I hope she's miserable way. Yeah, I know, that's petty. But whatever. It's how I felt. Then, one day, I was at the grocery store, minding my own business, when I saw them. Lauren's parents. I hadn't seen or heard from them since the divorce, so running into them like that? Completely unexpected. My first instinct was to turn around, walk the other way, and avoid the whole situation. But, of course, they spotted me before I could make my escape. Lauren's mom, Susan, made a beeline for me, her eyes already glassy with emotion. Her dad, Tom, was right behind her, looking serious. Too serious. I could feel the tension before either of them even said a word. Jason, Susan breathed, her voice trembling, as if just saying my name was enough to make her break down. I forced a polite nod, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. Susan. Tom. Susan reached out, placing a hand on my arm like we were long-lost friends. It's been so long. How have you been? I didn't really feel like getting into how I'd been. The truth was complicated, and honestly, I didn't think she really wanted the full answer. So I kept it simple. I'm doing fine. She nodded quickly, but her eyes were already glossy, like she was holding back tears. Listen, there's something we need to tell you. I didn't say anything. Just waited. Susan took a shaky breath, like she was trying to steady herself before delivering the blow. It's Lauren, she finally said, voice trembling. She was in a car accident. A bad one. She's in the hospital. Serious condition. I stood there, expression blank. My mind processed the words, but I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. I wasn't happy she was hurt, but I also wasn't about to start feeling sorry for her either. Susan kept talking, her voice cracking with emotion. She's been through so much, Jason. She's struggling. I had a bad feeling about where this conversation was heading. And then she said it. Would you visit her? She asked, her voice pleading. It would mean so much to her. Despite everything, you were such an important part of her life. I almost laughed. Was she serious? Did she really think I'd show up at Lauren's bedside after everything she put me through? I looked at her, and the only thing I could say was, Lauren isn't my problem anymore. I thought that was a pretty reasonable response, given the circumstances. But, of course, it didn't go over well. Susan's eyes widened in shock, and before I could turn to leave, she launched into a whole speech about forgiveness, about how I needed to let go of the past and show some compassion. Compassion? For the woman who cheated on me? Yeah. No thanks. Up until that moment, Tom had been standing there quietly, just watching. But now, he finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Jason, everyone makes mistakes, he said, giving me this look like he couldn't believe I wasn't rushing to Lauren's side. It would be good for both you and Lauren to make peace. And that was it. That was the moment I lost it. I had already been pissed that they were trying to guilt-trip me into caring about Lauren. But when Tom hit me with that, everyone makes mistakes line, I snapped. She cheated on me, Tom, I said, my voice sharp and unwavering. I didn't make a mistake. She did. And I don't owe her a damn thing. Especially not forgiveness. She could rot in that hospital bed for all I care. Susan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tom just shook his head, staring at me like I was the villain in all of this. I can't believe you're being this cruel, Susan whispered, tears spilling down her face. I let out a bitter laugh. Cruel? I scoffed. You want to talk about cruel? Where was all this energy when Lauren was screwing another man behind my back? Where was the lecture about mistakes when she was lying to my face? I shook my head, anger simmering just beneath the surface. You two have always made excuses for her, always acted like nothing was ever her fault. And now, because she got herself into an accident, I'm supposed to just forget everything she did. Susan was openly crying now, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Tom just let out a long breath, looking at me like I was a lost cause. They tried to keep talking, something about Lauren being in a bad place, about how life was too short for grudges, but I wasn't interested. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them standing there in the middle of the grocery store. Later that night, I got a call from my dad. Turns out, Lauren's parents had reached out to my family to complain about how cold I'd been to them. And just like that, the whole thing turned into a family argument. You should have just gone to see her, my dad said, sighing like I was being difficult. Then the bigger person, my sister chimed in, agreeing. Jason, it wouldn't have killed you to show a little kindness. But my mom, thank God, was the only one who actually backed me up. He doesn't owe Lauren anything, she said firmly. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. That should have been the end of it. But somehow, it wasn't. The debate kept going, even dragging some of my friends into it. Everyone had an opinion. Some thought I was being too harsh. Others said I was completely justified. And honestly, I didn't give a damn what any of them thought. I wasn't going to feel bad for not rushing to Lauren's side like some knight in shining armor. She made her choices. Now she had to live with them. So yeah, that's where I was. Lauren was in the hospital, her parents were pissed at me, and my own family was split down the middle about whether or not I should have visited her. But you know what? I wasn't losing any sleep over it. She wasn't my problem anymore. After that whole mess with Lauren's parents, I figured things would finally calm down. I wasn't expecting any more drama. Clearly, I was wrong. A few days later, I got a text from my sister, Sophie. It was one of those messages where you just knew it was going to lead to more crap. We need to talk about what happened with Lauren. I'm coming over. I sighed, already dreading whatever conversation was about to happen. I wasn't in the mood for another lecture on how I should have handled things differently. But Sophie's my sister. We're close. So I figured I'd hear her out. No big deal, right? Wrong. Sophie showed up at my place, and before I could even offer her a drink, she was already diving headfirst into the Lawrence situation. I get why you're angry, she started, arms crossed. But don't you think maybe you should have just visited her? Even if it was just for closure. I let out a dry laugh. Closure. I shook my head. Sophie, I got my closure 3 years ago when we signed the damn divorce papers. She sighed. I mean real closure, Jason. Seeing her one last time, saying whatever you need to say. I cut her off. I don't need to say anything. Lauren is in my past. That's exactly where I want her to stay. Sophie exhaled, clearly frustrated. Okay, but what if this is your last chance? What if something worse happens to her? I could feel my patience thinning. Why does everyone keep acting like she's some kind of victim? I snapped. She's not. She wrecked our marriage. She lied. She cheated. So why the hell should I care what happens to her now? Sophie frowned, but she didn't back down. Because you did care about her once, she said quietly. I shook my head. That was a long time ago. She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for something in my expression. Then she said, Jason, if someone did to you what Lauren did to me, would you be running to their bedside? I waited. I wanted to see her actually think about it. And for a second, I thought maybe I was getting through to her. But then she sighed and said, it's not the same, though. You guys were married. You shared a life together. And that was it for me. I was done with the conversation. I told Sophie I didn't want to hear about Lauren anymore. I wasn't changing my mind. Lauren could deal with her problems on her own. Sophie wasn't happy about it, but eventually she dropped it and changed the subject. We talked about other things, work, family, whatever. And just like that, the conversation was over. But even though Sophie had moved on to other topics, I could still feel it, that weird tension in the air. Like she was holding on to the whole Lauren thing, even though we weren't talking about it anymore. After she left, I sat there for a while, feeling this odd mix of frustration and confusion. Why was everyone so hell-bent on me visiting Lauren? I didn't owe her a damn thing. She cheated. I walked away. End of story. But for whatever reason, nobody else seemed willing to let it go. A couple of days later, I found out why. I got a call from my dad, and from the tone of his voice, I could tell this wasn't just a check-in. "We need to talk," he said, his words clipped. "I'm coming over." That was weird for him. My dad wasn't the type to just show up unannounced, so I knew something was up. When he got to my place, he barely stepped inside before lighting into me. "What the hell is wrong with you, Jason?" he snapped, his face red with anger. "You disrespected Lauren's parents. The least you could have done was show some damn decency and visit her in the hospital." I blinked, caught completely off guard. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, shaking my head. "Decency? Dad, she cheated on me. Why does everyone act like I owe her anything?" Dad let out a frustrated sigh, shaking his head. "It's not about owing her, Jason. It's about doing the right thing. I raised you better than this." I scoffed, crossing my arms. The right thing? The right thing would have been her keeping her vows instead of sneaking around behind my back. Dad exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples like I was exhausting him. "You're being cold-hearted," he muttered. "I didn't raise you to be this kind of man." I stared at him, dumbfounded. What the hell was happening? Why was everyone acting like I was the villain here? "I don't get it," I said, exasperated. "Why is this such a big deal to you? Lauren's not my family anymore. She made her choices, and I moved on." End of story. Dad's jaw tightened. His voice was lower now, but still full of tension. "Family is important, Jason," he said. "You don't just turn your back on people when they're at their lowest." And just like that, it clicked. This wasn't about Lauren. This was about him. His past. His mistakes. Things I'd never known about. Because in the middle of his rant, my dad let something slip, something that hit me like a punch to the gut. When my parents first got married, my mom had cheated on him. I just stood there, trying to process what I'd just heard. My mom had cheated. My dad, the guy who had spent my whole life preaching about loyalty and commitment, had gone through the exact same thing. And he stayed with her. That's when I lost it. I didn't yell, didn't explode. But I was done with the conversation. "I'm not you," I told him, my voice firm. "I'm not going to forgive Lauren just because you forgave Mom." His expression hardened, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, finally, he muttered, "You don't understand. It's not that simple." But to me, it was that simple. Lauren cheated. I wasn't going to forgive her. End of story. We went back and forth, him trying to make me see his side, me refusing to budge. He kept talking about love not being black and white, about mistakes, about how people don't just throw away years of history over one bad decision. But I wasn't buying it. "So what?" I asked. "You think I should just act like it never happened? Let her back into my life like nothing's changed?" Dad rubbed his face, looking exhausted. "No, Jason. I think you should at least acknowledge that people can change, that they can regret what they did and try to make things right." I let out a humorless laugh. "Right? And how do I know she actually regrets it? How do I know she wouldn't do it again?" His jaw clenched. "You don't," he admitted. "You just have to decide if what you had was worth a second chance." I shook my head. "Yeah, well, it wasn't." That was it. That was the final word. He stormed out, and we didn't exactly leave things on good terms. For the rest of the week, we didn't talk. That was unusual for us. The silence felt heavy, but I wasn't going to be the one to break it. The whole thing left me feeling off balance, like my entire understanding of my parents' marriage had just been flipped upside down. I kept wondering if I should talk to my mom about it, but I wasn't sure I wanted to open that door. A few days later, Sophie texted me again, telling me I should talk to Dad and make things right. But I wasn't ready. I needed time to process everything. It's not every day you find out your mom cheated on your dad, and that he stayed with her for decades without you ever knowing. It messed me up. Big time. So that's where things stood. My family was a mess. Lauren was still in the hospital as far as I knew, and I was just trying to figure out how to deal with all of it. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going back to that life. Lauren could stay in the past, and I'd keep moving forward, whether my family liked it or not. After the fight with my dad, things stayed tense. We didn't talk for a few weeks, which was completely out of character for us. Sophie kept trying to play the middleman, but I wasn't ready to make peace. I needed space. Then one night, I was sitting at home, watching TV, trying to relax, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was late, so I was curious. I picked up my phone and checked the message. It was Lauren. I just stared at the screen, completely thrown. I had no idea how she even got my number. I'd changed it right after the divorce, made sure there was no way for her to contact me. And yet, here she was. Her message was short. Can we talk? After 3 years of silence, she thought she could just pop back into my life with a can we talk? Like we were old friends catching up? At first, I didn't respond. I just sat there, debating whether I should block her and move on. But curiosity got the better of me. Before I could stop myself, I typed back, "What do you want?" Her reply came almost instantly. I need to clear the air. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the accident, and I need to apologize properly. I wasn't buying it. She had 3 years to reach out. And now, right after her parents tried guilt-tripping me at the grocery store, she suddenly wanted to talk? Yeah, no thanks. There's nothing to talk about, I texted back. We're done. I figured that would be the end of it. That after all these years, after everything that happened, Lauren would finally take the hint and disappear from my life for good. But she didn't. She kept texting, message after message, saying she had things she needed to explain, that she was sorry for everything, that she just wanted me to hear her out. Honestly, part of me was tempted. I wanted to know what she thought she could possibly say that would make up for what she did. But at the same time, I knew better. I knew there was nothing she could say that would change the past. So I didn't reply. Ignoring her was the best way to move on. But of course, that's not where it ended. The next day, I got another text, this time from Sophie. Hey, just a heads up. Lauren reached out to me too. I stared at the message, already annoyed. Why? I typed back. She says she's trying to make amends with everyone. Apparently, after the accident, Lauren had some kind of life-changing epiphany. Now, she wanted to fix all the things she'd screwed up. Sophie, being Sophie, thought I should at least consider giving her a chance to explain herself. What's the harm in hearing her out? She kept saying. But I wasn't about to let Lauren weasel her way back into my life just because she had a near-death experience. Sophie, this isn't your business, I told her flatly. Whatever guilt trip Lauren's trying to pull, I'm not interested. Jason, I'm just saying, maybe she really is changed. What if she just wants closure? Then she can get it somewhere else. I don't owe her a damn thing. Sophie sighed through text, but finally dropped it. And for a few days, things were quiet. No messages from Lauren. No more talks with Sophie. So I figured Lauren finally got the message. But just when I thought it was over, my phone rang. This time, it was my mom. Now, you have to understand, my mom doesn't call unless something serious is going on. We're not the kind of family that checks in with daily phone calls or casual small talk. So when I saw her name pop up on my screen, I knew something was up. I answered, already bracing myself. Hey, Mom. What's up? Right off the bat, she hit me with it. Jason, we need to talk about Lauren. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Mom, seriously. I just think you should listen to her, she interrupted, her voice softer than usual. She's been through a lot since the accident. She's changed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. She cheated on me, lied about the baby, and now, years later, she suddenly wants to talk because she almost died? I don't care how much she's changed. It doesn't change what she did. Jason, people can grow, Mom insisted. It wouldn't hurt you to hear her side. I clenched my jaw, frustration burning through me. Hearing her side won't magically undo the past, Mom. It won't change the fact that she destroyed my marriage and turned my life into a nightmare. But she wouldn't drop it. She kept going on about how Lauren was struggling, how she regretted everything, how this accident had been a wake-up call for her. It was like my mom had completely forgotten what Lauren did to me. Like she was willing to rewrite history just because Lauren said she was sorry. I get that you feel bad for her, I said, my voice tight. But I don't. And I don't have to. Jason, I just think. No, Mom. This isn't up for discussion. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking as I set my phone down. My heart was pounding with frustration. No matter how hard I tried to leave this chapter of my life behind, everyone seemed determined to drag me back into it. And the worst part? It wasn't just Lauren. It was my own family. They just didn't get it. They didn't understand, didn't want to understand how much Lauren's betrayal had wrecked me. They acted like it was some small thing I should just get over, like I was being stubborn or dramatic. But it wasn't small to me. It was my whole damn life that got turned upside down because of her. After a while, I told my mom I was done talking about Lauren. I wasn't going to visit her. I wasn't going to talk to her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her back into my life. I thought that would be the end of it. But then my mom hit me with something that stopped me in my tracks. Jason, Lauren is dying. I just stared at the phone, sure I had misheard her. What? Mom's voice was quieter now. Softer. The accident, she said. Her injuries were worse than you realize. She's still in the hospital, and the doctors, they don't think she has much time left. I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. That's why she wants to talk to you so badly, Mom continued. She wants to make things right before it's too late. I don't even know how to describe what I felt in that moment. It wasn't sadness, but it wasn't relief either. It was this weird, heavy feeling in my chest, like something I hadn't expected to care about was suddenly real. On one hand, part of me thought, well, that's karma, I guess. But on the other hand, it hit me. This person who had once been such a huge part of my life was dying, and I was refusing to even acknowledge her existence. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you'll regret it if you don't at least hear her out, she said. I know you're angry, Jason, and you have every right to be. But this is different. I let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over my face. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. Lauren was dying. She wanted to talk to me, and my mom thought I should let her. But did I want to? There was a long silence before I finally spoke. I'll think about it. That was all I could say. I didn't make any promises, but I didn't shut it down completely either. I just needed time. So now here I am, stuck in this weird place, not knowing what to do. Do I visit Lauren and give her the closure she's apparently looking for? Or do I stick to my guns and keep her out of my life, even if she doesn't have much time left? I don't know, man. It's a lot to process. Part of me feels like the right thing to do is hear her out. But another part of me? That part still remembers the betrayal, the lies, the pain. And I'm not sure if I can ever let that go. I spent the next few days just sitting with it, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. My mom's words kept echoing in my head, how this might be my last chance to talk to Lauren. It weighed on me, but not in the way you'd expect. I didn't suddenly feel bad for her. I wasn't about to rewrite history just because she was on her deathbed. But still, I couldn't shake the thought. Was I really okay with never seeing her again? Never saying anything? I went back and forth in my head, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. That Lauren was my past, and I had no reason to reopen that wound. But one night, when I couldn't sleep, I grabbed my keys and went for a drive. It's something I do when I'm stressed, just drive aimlessly, no destination in mind, letting the road quiet my thoughts. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going, just letting my hands steer while my mind wandered. And before I even realized it, I was parked outside the hospital. I didn't plan on going there. It just happened. I sat in my car, staring at the entrance, debating whether to go in or just leave. Part of me wanted to get it over with. Another part was screaming, "Why the hell are you even here?" I sat there for what felt like an eternity, maybe an hour, maybe more, just thinking. Thinking about every lie, every betrayal, every time she looked me in the eye and swore she loved me while sneaking around behind my back. Thinking about how, even after all that, she had the audacity to beg me to forgive her. And now, after everything, she wanted me to show up at her bedside like none of it had ever happened. It didn't feel right. But still, there I was, sitting in the hospital parking lot at 2 in the morning, trying to decide if I was actually going to walk through those doors. Eventually, I just said screw it. I got out of the car and walked inside. I wasn't even sure if they'd let me in at that hour, but the nurse at the front desk didn't give me much trouble. She looked a little surprised when I asked about Lauren, but after a moment, she nodded and pointed me in the direction of her room. And before I knew it, I was standing outside her door. I didn't go in right away. I just stood there, staring at the door, my hand on the handle, trying to convince myself to step inside. Part of me still wanted to turn around, to walk away and pretend I was never there. But I'd come this far. Might as well see it through. When I finally opened the door, Lauren was lying in bed, hooked up to a mess of machines. She looked different. Not just because of the accident, not just because she was sick. It was something else entirely. She looked tired, worn down in a way I hadn't expected. Like life had taken more from her than I ever realized. It was strange seeing her like that after all these years. At first, she didn't notice me. She was staring out the window, lost in thought. But then she turned her head, and when her eyes landed on me, they widened in shock, like she couldn't believe I was actually standing there. For a few long moments, neither of us said a word. I didn't know what to say, and I think she was too stunned to speak. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, like just getting the words out took effort. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, well, Here I am. Another long pause. And then, out of nowhere, Lauren started to cry. Not the over-the-top, attention-seeking sobs she used to pull when we were together. This was different. It was quiet, raw, real, and I wasn't expecting it. Lauren had always been good at flipping on the waterworks when it suited her, but this felt genuine. Her voice shook as she whispered, "I'm sorry." She swallowed hard, her eyes shining with fresh tears. "I know I don't deserve to ask for your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that." I just stood there, not really knowing how to respond. Because what do you even say to something like that? I wasn't about to tell her everything was okay, because it wasn't. But I hadn't come here to rip her apart, either. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "I don't know what you want me to say." Her lip trembled as she wiped her face. "You broke my trust. You broke us. That's not something you can just apologize for and expect to go away." Lauren nodded, still crying. "I know," she whispered. "I know I hurt you. I was selfish and stupid, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know, I'm sorry for everything. For ruining what we had. For not being the person you deserved." Hearing her say that was weird. Part of me wanted to be angry. Wanted to throw every mistake back in her face. Make her feel the same pain I had felt. But the truth? I wasn't angry anymore. Maybe I had been for so long that I just ran out of it. The hurt was still there. That weight I'd been carrying for years. But the rage? It was gone. I looked at her, really looked at her. The girl I had once loved. The woman who had shattered me. Sitting in that hospital bed, looking smaller, weaker than I'd ever seen her. Time had changed us both. And in that moment, something clicked. Closure wasn't about her. It was about me. I had spent years holding on to my anger, convincing myself it was protecting me. But really? It had just been keeping me trapped in the past. I took a slow breath and said the words I didn't expect to say. "I don't hate you anymore." Lauren's breath hitched, her eyes wide. "But I'm never going to forget what you did." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I wouldn't expect you to." The silence that followed wasn't heavy or suffocating. It just was. Like we both knew this was the last time we'd ever see each other. And maybe that was okay. After a while, I stood up to leave. Lauren looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "It means more to me than you know." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked out of the room. As I made my way back to my car, I felt something I hadn't in years, relief. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't anger either. It was like a weight had been lifted, like maybe, just maybe, that chapter of my life was finally over. For real this time. I got in my car, sat there for a moment, and took a deep breath. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move on. And you know what? That felt pretty damn good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.